Hilchas Mechirah Perek Echad V'Esrim. Hamakna lechaveri davar she'eni mesuimus. He's being makna something which is a non-specific item, something which is not specific. It's not clear what he's being makna. Is if the type of item that he's being makna is clear, the species is clear, is afal pishay midase umishkoli minyani yadua, even though it's not clear how many or how much it weighs or how big it is, but he knows the type of item that he's being makna, so then he is koina. However, if he's being makna something which is not clear what the species of the item is that he's being makna, so then leikona, that's not considered a kinyan. He makes a deal with someone that he's selling him a pile of chitim, this pile of chitim, for this and this amount of money. Or martiv zeshel yain ani meichelecha, I'm selling you this cellar of wine, bekach v'kach, for a certain amount of money. Or sak shel teinim, I'm selling you a sack of figs, ani meichelecha bekach v'kach. Aval pi she'ein midas ha'arei meyadu, we don't know exactly the size of this pile, and also v'lei mishkal ateinim, we don't know how much the figs weigh, v'lei minyan akankan, we don't know how many jugs of wine is in this martiv, is nevertheless harizim karikaim. The deal is a deal. Afal pi she'nimtza choser yesra le'im etchoyi b'daitom, even though it's more or less than what they originally assessed it. But Lepel, since we were speaking about something which we knew what we were speaking about, whereas the seller and the buyer, it was clear what they're talking about. They're talking about an arema shel chitim, or they're talking about a martiv shel yayin, or they're talking about a sak shel te'enim. So even though they didn't know exactly how much it is, they thought it was more, they thought it was less. But nevertheless, the sale is valid. V'yesh lem hinoya lefi ashar shebeshuk meisha biyanu. The rules of hinoya apply. In other words, if they made up for this item for a certain amount of money, now if this amount of money exceeds this, either the buyer or the seller is being cheated with over 6%, so then you could be mavatal the mekach mehilchis ino. If it's less than 6%, I'm saying a sixth. I said 6%. In other words, if they know is over a sixth, so then you can be mavatal the mekach. If they know is under a sixth, so then it's mechila, and if it's a sixth, so you machzir the money. So in other words, that's a separate din. The sale was a sale. It's just there's halacha ve'ino. I know is another halacha. That's talking about if the min was yedua. I'm selling you everything in this house. I'm selling you everything in this box, even though we don't know clearly what's in this box. Or everything that's in this sack, I'm selling you for this and this price. And the Lekech said, I agree. And he made a Maisa Kinyan, he made a Mechirah. Is Ein Kan Kinyan, that's not called a Kinyan. When a person makes a Maisa Kinyan on something that he doesn't, not only doesn't know how much it is, but rather he doesn't know what it is, so then that's not called a Maisa Kinyan. There's no real Smichas Das, because a Kinyan, it's not enough a Maisa Kinyan, there has to be a Smichas Das of the Kena that he wants to be Kena, and that the Meicher wants to be Meicher. The Meicher knows what's in there, but the Leker doesn't know what's in there. Shari Eini there, he doesn't know what's in this box. Im Tevin, maybe there's straw in the box, or Izova, maybe there's gold in the box. The Einzel Kimisachri Bekuvi, there's just like a person by chance, there's no real Smichas Das. When a person commits himself that if this and this happens, he's going to give a certain amount of money. So he doesn't really, it's not a real commitment because he's hoping that that's not going to happen. So over here also, the commitment to this sale, that he's buying it, he doesn't know what he's buying. So therefore, that's not really considered a Maisa Kinyan. Someone says, I'll sell you chitim 10 dinim worth. And but they didn't make up how many soy he's going to actually have to give him. He says, I'll give you 10 dinim worth of chitim. So the din is noisele kishar shebeshuk shebeshas mechira. So notice the seller has to give him according to the price in the market. And notice there's a certain price, which that's the set price for chitim at that point in time. So he makes up with him. He makes a Maisa Kinyan that I'm selling you 10 dinim worth of chitim. So he has to provide him 10 dinim worth of chitim, and that's considered a proper transaction. Now, since Lepela was only mois, so we have a rule that mois is not koina. So therefore, they could have a charata in the sense that just like every time you make a ma'aseh with mois on even something specific, you could have charata. But on the other end, the person that has charata is supposed to get a pishapara, like we learned. So Nachamal, someone sold someone chitim 10 dinim worth, and but they didn't make up, they didn't specify how many saw he actually sold them. Is noisely kishasha b'shuk sheb'shas mechira. He gives them according to the price in the market during that time when they made the sale. And whoever has charata after the money was given, transferred, and he's not willing to go ahead and take the chitim for that price, is mekabel mishapari, is mekabel mishapari. And this din of v'chein means just like we learned before, that even though it wasn't specific, but as long as we know what we're talking about, the min is specific. So therefore the ma'aseh is a ma'aseh. So over here also, even though he didn't know how many saw he's actually getting, he didn't know the shar shebeshuk. But Lepel, since he knew he was getting chitim, so therefore he gives him kishar shebeshuk, and that's considered a proper transaction. However, since it was a transaction that happened with money, so memele you can be chesed. Halacha hey, hamecher mokim lechavere lasis bayis erefes boker. He made up with him, I want to buy a piece of property, a piece of land, which I should be able to build a house there, or I should be able to build a corral for my boker. V'chein amekabel mechaveri, someone accepts upon himself, lasis lebeis chasnus lebnei, knows he's going to build a house for him, for his son to get married in, a beis almanas lebite, or his daughter became an almana, and now she's coming back to her father, so he wants to build a house for her. So he accepted upon himself to build a house for someone. So how big a house does he have to be? They weren't specific how big the house should be. So the din is oisule arba'amis al sheish. Stamazin, when they make up that he's going to sell him a piece of karka to build a house, or he made up that he's going to committed himself to build a house for him, so the commitment, and they made up a price for how much he's going to get for building this house, so the building that has to be 4 amas by 6 amas. Now, mokim bayis gadol, they specified clearly that there's a mokim bayis gadol, so then is oisa shmeina lesser, not 4 by 6, but 8 by 10. Now, mokim traklim, which a traklim is like a mansion, very large house, so not only 8 by 10, but then it's 10 al 10, oisa esa al esa. Now, he made up with him that he's going to give him a tarbit shel chotzer. A tarbit shel chotzer is like a garden in front of the chotzer that'll be in addition to the house. There'll be this tarbit shel chotzer, this garden. So the din is, how big should this tarbit shel chotzer be? The tarbit shel chotzer should be shtei mesri, 12 by 12. That's talking about the dimensions of the width and the length. Now, the room kol bayis ubayis, how big does the house have to be? How tall does the house have to be? It has to be the room kol bayis ubayis kechatzi orke b'chatzi rochbi. The height should be half of the width and half of the length. So, for example, if you have the basic house, which was 4 by 6, so basically 4 by 6 is 4 plus 6 is 10, so then the height should be 5 amas. If you have a house which is 8 by 6, so then the height has to be 7 amas, because 8 plus 6 is 14, so half of that would be 7 amas. Now, if you have 10 by 10, so the height would be 10. So that's the din, that the height has to be chatzi rochbe and chatzi orke. Halacha va. So basically, the din is that even though there wasn't a specific upred of the size, but lepel, when they make up a thing that I'm buying a place for a house, so Chazal told us what's considered a regular place. What's considered a regular place for a house? What's considered a regular place for a bayis? What's considered a regular place for a bayis gadol? What's considered a regular place for a traklin? And what's considered a regular place for a tarbit shel chotzer. Halacha vav, hamecher mokim lechaveri lasis likfura. Someone sells a place to someone for him to make a place for burial. Oya mekabel mechaveri lasis likfura, or a person's working for someone else and he accepts upon himself that he's going to make from a place in his karka a place for burial. Now the Seder Dvarim is not like today that you bury someone like just you dig a caver and you bury in that caver above the ground. What they would do would be is that they would like dig into the ground and that would be an opening, and then they would dig under the ground like a vault, be like a cave in the ground, and so you would go down in the ground, and then there would be like an opening, and that opening would be an area which would be an opening which is an area of 6 amas by 4 amas. That would be the opening that you would go into. There would be like a hole in the ground, you would go down into the ground, and then from that area, from that hole, you would go into like a vault, we'll call it, and that, which was the cave, and that area was the place where the kvaris were. Now those kvaris, they would have, that you'd create a vault, and that vault would be, a regular vault would be 4 amas by 6 amas, and on the walls of this vault, there were little vaults, and on each one of them, they would put a mess. So on the side, in those, it would be 6 amas long by 4 amas wide. So on the side and the 6 amas long, they would put 3 mesim along those 6 amas. So mainly each mess would take up an amas, and that would be 3 amas. And then between the 2 mesim, there would be another 1.5 amas. So you would have a mess right away when you walk into the vault. So on the right, there would be a mess in the wall of the vault. Again, you dig into the ground, and then you'd open an area under the ground, coming out of that area which you dug into, and that would be the vault under the ground. We'll call it a cave. And that area, that vault was 6 amas by 4 amas wide. Now, that vault had walls. Now, in those walls, they would build other vaults, smaller vaults, for the mess to lie into. So it would be 6 amas long and 4 amas wide. The 6 amas long, they would put 3 kvarim. Each kaver was 1 amma wide. So mele it comes out. So as soon as you walk into the vault, so that first amma, let's say on your right, would be a place where one mess would go in, and there would be an amma wide, and then there would be another amma and a half, and then you would make another vault, which would be an amma wide, and then there would be another small vault, which was an amma wide, and then you'd put in a third mess. So on one wall, you'd have 3 mesim. Each mess would take up an amma in the width, and between the mesim, there would be an amma and a half. So there would be the first, there would be nothing before him, and then there would be an amma and a half, and then there would be the second, and then there would be another amma and a half, and there would be the third. And the same thing, on the opposite wall, there would be also another 3 mesim. Now on the wall that you're facing when you walk in, this was talking about the wall on your right, the wall on your left. The wall you're facing when you come in, which was 4 amas wide, they would also put 2 vaults into those into that wall, and over there also each vault would be an amma thick, an amma wide rather, and they would put the mace into the vault, and between the 2 mason there would be 2 amas. That's what we're learning over here. Halacha vav, hamoicher mokim lechaveri lasis lekfura. You sell him a place to make for burial. Or you accept it upon yourself to make a place for this person in his area to make a kfura. Is oisamari, you have to make a mara. Mara is like a cave. But in other words, you make a vault. You dig into the ground, you make a vault under the ground. In this vault, a regular size caver would be shmoina kvarim. There would be 8 caves. 8 kvarim. Shloisha mikan, 3 on each side of the vault. And as we're saying, on the length of the vault. So you have the length of the vault is 6 amas, and the width of the vault is 4 amas. So shleish mikan on either side of the length of the vault, you have 3. Ushnayim mikeneged hanichus l'mayra. And when you walk into the mayra, when you're walking into this vault, so there would be 2 against on that wall, which would be facing you. When you walk in, there would be another 2. That would be 8, 2, 3, 3, and 2. Now, midas hamayra, how big would the mayra be? It would be arba amas al sheish. The length would be 6 amas, and the width would be 4. And v'chol kever v'kever, each kever, how deep would you make the vault for the kever? Because when you're digging the vault into the wall, you're talking about the wall of the vault. In other words, you're making we're calling the mayra a vault, whatever you want to call it. You call it a cave. In other words, we're talking about a vault under the ground, and in this vault, it has walls. And in those walls, you make small vaults. So the whole caver. So how big are those vaults that you're putting the mess into? So they're arba amas eirach. The length of that vault, of that little vault where the mess is going to go into, is going to be at 4 amas. And v'reichav, and the width of those little vaults, where the mess is going to go into is going to be shisha tvachim. Shisha tvachim is 1 amma. And the room and the height of those little vaults, because the mess is going to be lying in there, so the mess is going to be lying in there, so the height of the mess while the mess is lying would be shiva, would be 7 tvachim. Is nimtza, so comes out, so you have the width of each of these little vaults, which are the kvarim, would be each one an amma wide, 6 tvachim, is nimtza ben kol kever v'kever shemin atzdodim, is amma umetza. Between each kever, there's 3 kvarim, because we're talking about six amas, so it's 3 kvarim. Each kever takes up an amma, and between the two, and so that would be the 6 on the middle. And so nimtza ben kol kever v'kever shemin atzdodim. Between each kever and atzdodim, there's an amma u'mechza, there's an amma and a half, because each of those kvarim take up an amma. So between the kvarim, there's an amma and a half, like we said before. Between the middle ones, which middle ones he means the wall that you're facing when you walk into this vault, and you put little vaults into that, and each vault again is the width of an amma, and the whole wall is only 4 ammas wide. So in Mela, between those 2 kvarim, will be shtei ammas. So that's a seder of a standard kaver that you would make. You would make a kaver which would be 6 ammas by 4 ammas. That would be the size of this vault of this Mechirah, and on each of those walls, the 3 walls, you would put kvarim together. You would have 8 kvarim, 3, and then 2 on the wall that you're facing, and another 3 on the opposite wall, and then that would be the seder. Halacha zayin. Hamoicher lechavere b'teich sodeu mekeim amas hamayim lahashkiz bo beis hashalchem. So you have, let's say, a river, and the river has someone has a field that's next to the river, and you have a field next to that field. So you want to get water from the river, so you want to have a channel of water going through your neighbor's field that's coming from the river and coming into your field. So you're buying from him a place in his field to be able to extend the channel of water that's coming from wherever it is, from the source of the water, to your field. Is in your field you're selling to your friend a place for a channel of water, lahashkiz ba beis hashalchen, in order to be able to be mashka beis hashalchen, which is a field that needs irrigation. So the din is how much do you have to give him when you make up that you're giving him an irrigation channel, an irrigation canal? How much do you have to give him? So you give him b'teich sadei or amma. You have to give him such a canal shirach ba shtei amas, which is 2 amas wide, and also v'ama mikan laba gafer. So in other words, there's also an amma on each side of this amas hamayim. The amas hamayim is 2 amas wide, but there's also an amma on each side of this amas hamayim, which also you have a balabatishkeit over, which is that balabatishkeit is you could stop the owner of the field from going ahead and planting on it zroim, as we'll learn b'hamshach. That's this din. So b'kitzur, when a person makes up stam that he's buying an amas hamayim he's buying an area in his field in order to be able to extend an amas hamayim to bring water into his field. So the pashtus advar means that they made up that he's going to give him an amas hamayim which is 2 amas wide, and he's also going to have an amma on each side of this amas hamayim that would be like the walls of this amas hamayim. And if he told him clearly that he needs an amas hamayim and eventually to extend it with a pipe, so then this amas hamayim doesn't have to be so wide. So then he doesn't have to give him an amma which is wide 2 amas. It's enough that it'll give him a channel, a water canal, an irrigation canal, which is only rach be'amma, and also v'chatzi amma mikan. For the sides, he'll only need a chatzi amma and a chatzi amma. So if it's a regular amas hamayim, so then he can insist that he wants 2 amas. That's the normal standard. And if it's an amas hamayim that he's going to use a ceiling, which is a pipe, so then he needs a narrower amas hamayim. So it's enough 1 amma, and from the 2 sides will be a half amma. Now elu hagapim balasod noitan. So there's these sides which we're saying, which are also being given to the Baal Amas Hamayim, to the person that's using this channel, is the Baal Asada, the person that owns the field. He could still plant trees there, but he's not allowed to go ahead and plant seeds over there. Why? Because the Zroim are going to cause the karka to become soft, and make it like holy, full of holes, so that it'll ruin this irrigation channel, canal. So therefore, if you have a tree and the tree will just go down, have roots, that's not a problem. But if you have over there seeds, you're going to be planting seeds, that's going to ruin this irrigation canal. And what happens if the sides of the Amas Hamayim started falling in? So mainly it needs to be fixed. Is Baal Ha'ama misaknon ba'afar eiseh hasoda? In other words, he doesn't have to go and bring earth from elsewhere. He could use the earth of that field. In other words, if let's say the earth near this irrigation canal started falling in, so now he needs earth in order to set up again this irrigation canal, that it should be firm and the water should flow nicely. So therefore, where does he have to take the earth? He doesn't have to go ahead and import earth from elsewhere in order to build this irrigation canal to make sure that it's proper. He could go ahead and use earth from the field, mesaknon ba'afar eiseh hasoda, because shal menas ken kibul olav hamecher lias amas hamayim b'teich sadeo. Now that's part of the deal. In other words, when the seller, for whatever price he got, to be able to have this amas hamayim, agreed to have the amas hamayim, so part of the agreement is to have this amas hamayim, that the amas hamayim, the pasture should be 2 amas wide, and that he shouldn't have a right to plant next to the amas hamayim. And in case the agafeh falls in, so this person, whoever is using this amas hamayim, should be able to use the earth of that field in order to rebuild and to reestablish this amas hamayim. Halacha tes hamoicher lechaveri derech b'teich sadeo. Again, someone has a field, and someone else wants to buy a road or a path to go through the field. We'll soon see what the path is for. So the question is, what do we assume? They didn't make up exactly the size of the path. So the question is, what kind of size do we assume that was included in the sale? So again, over here, the mino is yadua, like we learned before. He knows exactly what he's buying. He just doesn't know how much he's buying. So Chazal are telling us how much we consider that's the pashtus and how much he bought. Sells him a derech b'teich sadeo that he can use his field as a path for him. He asked for a derech yochid. He needs a path for himself, a private path for someone to be able to go through, whoever it is. So how wide does that have to be? So that path has to be 2.5 amas wide. And the purpose of this 2.5 amas wide is so a chamer, a loaded donkey, should be able to go on this path and travel on this path. So we assume a loaded donkey is about 2.5 amas wide. Now, derech ben ir li'ir, he asks for a path. He wants a path with the type of path that you go from one city to another city, which is obviously a larger area, a larger road, a road which you go from one city to another city. Is noiseloi shmeina amas b'reich chaderech. So then he has to give him a path in this field which is 8 amas wide. And the cheshbon is because we assume that an agola is about 4 amas wide, and if there will be 2 agolas, then there should be two-way traffic. One agola is going one way, the other agola is going the other way, so that we should be able to go past each other. So therefore you need 8 amas. So that's the cheshbon, that a derech ben ir li'ir needs to be 8 amas. Now, mocher li derech harabim, made up clear that he's making a derech harabim. So a derech harabim, noisnei reichav sheish esri amma, which is also the shear of a rishus harabim. Rishus harabim is tez zayin amma. So also a derech harabim is considered tez zayin amma. So nachma, a regular derech is 2.5 amas. A derech ben ir li'ir is 8 amas, and a derech harabim is considered 16 amas. Now, what happens if he said, I want a derech which is called a derech hamelech or a derech hakever? So then ain't lo shear. So there's no real shear. There's no real. You can't really quantify how big the derech hamelech is. Whatever the melech needs, that's how the size it'll be. The melech paid us all the kind of gedarim. And al derech is a derech hakever if you're going to bury someone. So also many people traveling together. So also derech hakever is also very wide. So therefore, ein lo shear, there's no specific shear, and therefore says the Rambam and the Elisha zekemecher davar she'mina yadua. We learned before that if you sell something which is mina yadua, and it's just the amount is not yadua, so then there is a gemiras das. Masha'inkin over here, since it's so not yadua the amount, and as we don't know that could be that it's ein lo shear, so then even though it's mina yadua, because we're talking about a derech, but it's keilu ein mina yadua. And therefore, there's no real gemiras bas when a person makes up that we're selling a derech hamelech. Halacha Yudalef. Machar le mokim le maimed. Maimed is a place where they would stand after near the Beis HaKvares, and there would be a whole Seder Advarim of getting up and sitting down 7 times in the Seder of when they bury someone. So if he sold them a place that you would be able to do maimed, should do this maimed, which is near the Beis HaKvares. So noisim le beis arba kavim. He gives them a place where you could plant arba kavim. Arba kavim knows, just to get an idea, arba kavim, in other words, a base saw is 50 amas by 50 amas. That's a base saw. So, and a saw is the 6 kabim. So basically, it's like 2/3 of 50 amas by 50 amas. So base arba kabim is is 2/3 of a base saw. Halacha yud base. I'm selling you the bear. There was a bear. Person had a bear in his field. I'm selling you the bear, and I'm also selling you the walls of the bear. Now, how big are the walls of the bear? The walls of the bear is the earth. So how wide are the walls of the bear? So we say noisonly reichav kesel shleisha tvachim. The 3 tvachim around the bear, even though it's earth, but that's considered the wall of the bear. So maybe when he sold him the bear uksolah, it means he sold him the bear plus 3 tvachim around the bear. Halacha yid gimel. Hamecher sada lechaveri. A person selling someone a field, and he wants to describe where the field is. Now, umatzar le meitze echad aruch. He said that, let's say, on the Mizrach side, there's this and this person's field, and that's a long meitzer. And then umeitzer echad katzer, and on the Ma'ariv side, he didn't explain to him, he didn't give him the boundary for the same length that he gave him on the Mizrach side. So on the Ma'ariv, he gave him a shorter length of explaining the boundaries, the Ma'ariv boundary, and on the Mizrach, it was a longer one. Is in Haya Aruch Shel Ishachad. So as he said, on the Mizrach it borders Reuven's field, and on the Ma'ariv it borders Shimon's field. Now Shimon's field borders much less area than Reuven's field on the Mizrach. So Lepel, since we could assume that Be'amis he was only selling in the field the size of Shimon's field, which is a shorter field. On the Mizrach he said Reuven's field, which is a longer field. Yeah, because Lepel, Reuven owns a longer field. So Memele, he mentioned Reuven, but he only means Reuven's field borders this field that I'm selling, which is opposite the part of the field which borders Shimon. So let's say if Reuven's field borders this field on one side 100 amos, and Shimon's field borders the field on the Ma'ariv side 50 amos. So he told him the border of Shimon on Ma'ariv, and he told him the border of Reuven on Mizrach. So we say, yeah. So since there's only 50 amos on the Ma'ariv, so we could assume there's only 50 amos on Mizrach. I said Reuven. The answer is yeah, because Lepel, Reuven owns 100 amos. So Lepel, he said Reuven, but he only meant 50 of Reuven's field. That's the Pashtus Advar. Nochamol. Hamecher sada lechaveri, he's selling someone a field. Umatzalei meitze echad aruch. One side he told him a longer boundary. Umeitze echad katzer, on the other side he told him a shorter boundary. Now, if the longer one belonged to one person, so there was nothing that he did in order to imply that he wants it to be a longer boundary, is leikanim in the arach elikaneged katzer. We assume that he meant the size of the field that goes to Shimon's boundary and cut it across to the field. He's not selling the whole part of the field that's adjacent to Reuven's boundary. However, so then Yika connected Reishter. So notice, let's say Reuven owns a field on the right, on the Mizrach, and Shimon owns the field in the Ma'ariv. He went ahead and says, on the Ma'ariv side, the border is Shimon's field. That's all he said. Then he said, on the Mizrach side, the border is Reuven's field, and Reuven also has a field that's 50 amos long. And then he says, and also Levi's field. So here you're clearly seeing that he's clearly making the extension longer. He's making the extension longer because he's saying Levi as well. In other words, if he would have said Reuven, and Reuven has 100, so we say he said Reuven. Reuven has 100, but he only meant Reuven, which was Keneged Shimon. But since Lepel, he said Levi, so obviously he meant the whole field which goes to Levi. But on the other side, he only said Shimon. So therefore, you go diagonally. So in other words, between Reuven and Shimon, so you have, between Reuven and Shimon, you have the square area. And then when it comes to the extension, where he has one place longer, one place shorter, you make a diagonal line, and that diagonal line, that's the part that he sold. That's the taish. Kineged reish ter. You make a diagonal line across the field, and you say that he sold him that field diagonally. Now, halacha yudalit. Hoya meitzer Ruvain mizrach u'mayrav. Ruvain had a field, side of the mizrach side of this field, and side of the mayrav side of this field, and umeitzer Shimon tzofim v'dorim. And Shimon had on the tzofim and the dorim side of the field a field. Now, tzarech sheyichtav lei meitzer Ruvain mishtei ruches, umeitzer Shimon mishtei ruches. He has to clearly write that I'm selling you a field that which will be bordered by Ruvain from both sides, and which will be bordered from Shimon from both sides. Because Lepel, if he's going to tell them just, let's say, that I'm selling you a field, and you should know that there's a border on this field from Reuven, there's a border on this field from Shimon. In other words, it's surrounded by Reuven and Shimon. It's not going to say clearly that it's bordered from both sides from Reuven and both sides from Shimon. So again, there's a concern that maybe he meant that it should be diagonally. There should be a diagonal. In other words, he's only going to get half of the field diagonally. So the male is going to come out that he's going to have one side is going to be bordered by Reuven, and one side will be bordered by Shimon. Again, Reuven has Mizrach and Ma'ariv, and Shimon has Safan and Darim. So if he writes clearly that Reuven is going to be bordering from both sides, and Shimon is going to be bordering from both sides, so it's clear that he wants the whole field. Masha'enkin, if he's going to say you're going to be bordered by Reuven and Shimon, by Reuven and Shimon. So yeah, so let's say if he slices the field in half diagonally, so it'll be bordered. On one side it'll be bordered from Reuven, and on the other side it'll be bordered from Shimon. But on the other end, he's not going to have the rest of the field, which also would be bordered by Reuven and Shimon. So in order to make it clear that he's selling him the entire field, and he's not only selling him a half of the field, so he has to say that he's going to be bordered from Reuven and Shimon from both sides. Halacha tezvov. Now we have a situation where there's 4 borders, and he only made up 3. He only mentioned 3 of the borders. Now, if you mention 3 of the borders, you could figure out yourself that obviously you're going to have to make a line across between the let's say he made a ches. He didn't tell them a mem. It's not like a shlos mem. He gave him the borders of a ches. So obviously the ches, you're going to make a line across the ches. But the question is, what's happening on that line across the ches? In other words, in that border which is across the ches, if that border itself is really kol in the ches, so we'll soon learn B'hamshach. Matzalei, Metzer Rishon, Umetzer Sheni, Umetzer Shlishi. He clearly spelled out the Metzer on one side, the Metzer on the other side, and the third side. 3 sides. Again, we have a ches. The 4th side he didn't spell out. So the din is Kana Asodakuli, he's Kana the entire field. That's Pashut, because everything that's contained within those 3 fields. Avul Meitzer Reviyah, but the actual border, the actual 4th border, the border itself, the field, he's Taka Koina, everything that's in between that area. But the border is not Koina. The border is not Koina, because the border, he never spoke about that border. He didn't speak about that border. Now, Vim Hoya Muvla Beina Mitzarim. Now, there could be 3 in Yonim over here. First of all, that border is actually Muvla between the 3 borders. In other words, the border that's really borders this field. If I said there was like something which showed that it was a border of the field. There was a field, and then there was a border to the field. Now, if this border of the field is actually within the area that he made up, he spoke about the 3 fields, and the border is actually taka inside those 3 fields. So v'imhoya muvla beina mitzarim. So that border was actually inside those 3 fields, and also ve'ein olav rechav shel dikolim. And that border doesn't have anything specific. It doesn't have like a row of palm trees, which would give it a chshivas. That border would be a chshivas. And also, that border is not a large area, ve'ein by tisha kapim, so it has 3 inyanim. It's muvla bein ha-mitzarim. In other words, the 3 boundaries that he mentioned, this is that's within those 3 boundaries. In other words, it's within those 3 boundaries. The 3 boundaries, in other words, the border is like inside, it's like going inside those 3 boundaries. The border means the place which is used as the border of this field. And also the border is not a makom choshev, and also it's not a big area. So the din is kon afa metzar revi. So even this 4th border is also part of the sale. Even he didn't write clearly the 4th border, but we assume that since it's nivla in the 3 borders, and it doesn't have any chshivas of tkolim, and it doesn't have chshivas of tisha kabim, so it's nichlal. Now v'im leihoya muvla, if it has all the in other words, v'im leihoya muvla, it wasn't part of those three, it wasn't inside those three borders, and the yeshel of rechiv shel tkolim, and it has a rechiv shel tkolim, eishi yesh tisha kabim. In other words, sai, it's not in those borders. And say it has a chshivas. Either the chshivas is a rechiv shel kolim, or the chshivas is tisha kabim, is leikonos, and then he wasn't kain. So that's clearly if it knows it doesn't knows if it doesn't have any of the milas, so then for sure he was kain. If it has a rechiv shel kolim or tisha kabim, and it's also not muvla, so there's two inyanim against it. So certainly he's not kain. Now, however, haya muvla, if it was muvla in those three fields, and lepeil it has a chshivas, v'yeshel of rechiv tkolim mishiyesh betisha kabim, that's one option. Ein shalei haya muvla, and ve'enol of rechiv tkolim, ve'en betisha kabim. So notice it doesn't have any milas. It doesn't have any milas because it's not rechiv tkolim and betisha kabim. But on the other end, it's not muvla. Or even if it is muvla, and it has a mila, it's muvla and it has a mila. So here is Ariyah Dovim Masalabaz, and that's not clear. So again, when a person makes these borders, he made three borders. Now the question is, if everything that's included in those three borders are part of the sale. So we say, well, what's the shaila? The shaila is that there's also a border. There's a border to this field, which the border could have a chshivas. So the question is that border part of the sale? So we say, if that border is included in those three borders, in other words, the border goes into those three borders. So the three borders really, if you make a straight line at the end of the three borders, at the end of the ches, so this border is inside that ches, and also that border has no chshivas. There's no rechiv shel tkolim there. It's not tisha kabim. So then it's nishdav sereden that it's part of the sale. That's pasha. That's part of the sale. That's din number one. L'idach, if that border is not inside that ches, that border extends outside the ches, and on the other end, that border also has a chshivas. So again, there's nothing to talk about that it's not part of the sale, and therefore it belongs to the original seller. It belongs to the original seller, not part of the sale. The question is, what happens if it's inside and it has a chshivas, or it's outside and it doesn't have a chshivas? So again, when it's inside and it doesn't have a chshivas, so there's nishdava serei. When it's outside and it has a chshivos, there's also nishdava serei. But if it's inside and it doesn't have a chshivos, or it's outside and if it's inside and doesn't have a chshivos, if it's inside and it doesn't have a chshivos, so for sure it belongs to him. But if it's inside and it does have a chshivos, or if it's outside and it doesn't have a chshivos, so then it's a suffix, and then it depends on how Bezin paskins what's the netiyah, whether this was yet part of the sale or not part of the sale. Halacha tezayin. Now siyum lei is hazovi is bulvad. So until now we're talking about, he's telling him the border, the length of the border, the length of one side, the other side, how many sides. Now what happens if he only told him the corners of the field? Siyum lei is hazovi is bulvad, he told him the corners of the field. So the one corner, the right, there was the Mizrach is Svenis, Mizrach is Dremis, and Marav is Svenis, Marav is Dremis. So Siyamle is Hazavis Bulvad, Vili Siyamle es HaMetzah Shel Chol Ruach, he didn't clearly spell out the boundary along the entire way. Eshe Siyamle Shnei Mitzarim K'min Gam, he only made a Shnei Mitzarim like an L shape. On those, he didn't really make four sides, and he didn't even make three sides. He only made two sides, but a K'min Gam, which is like an L shape. Eshe Siyamle Chelik M'Kol Ruach V'Ruach, or he didn't go again and make the entire boundary. He just told him parts of the boundary on each side. So then Hareza Likonas Kulam. He's not cleaning everything. You don't go ahead and say, since he made this corner, this corner, this corner, this corner, you're going to go ahead and make a square. Or if you made this L, again, you're going to make a square. What he's told him clearly, that obviously is kaina. And also the Kamashira Dayanim, how much the Dayanim will assess that the pashtus, that's also part of the sale. In other words, since he didn't make it clearly what's the sale, so what's clear part of the sale, so obviously it's part of the sale. But since Lamashli, he made the corners. And the question is, does it mean that you should make mamash a full square? Or maybe you should cut off parts, depending. So the Bezdin has to assess to see what the field is like, and whether it's shaykhus to cut off parts and say that he's only selling this part and not this part. So that Bezdin has to assess. Halacha Yud Zayin. Hamecher bayis lechaveri bebira gedel. Bira gedel means a large building, like a large building, and a bayis would mean a room. So you have a room in a large building. Now the question, he's telling him that he's selling him a room in a large building, and he's telling him the size of the building. He's saying, I'm telling you a bayis in this building, and now he writes, and he makes up with him, and he writes in the shtar, he spells out the size of the building. He gives him the dimensions of the building. He told him the whole dimensions of the entire building. And there are those people that call a bira bais. He said, I'm selling you a bias in this bira, and this is the size of the bira. Is late kane Allah bias bulvad. Why? Because Lepel, since he said that he's selling him a bias, he didn't tell him he's selling him the bira. So even though he wrote the boundaries of the bira, but he was just extending the boundaries. But in reality, he was only selling him the bias. Had the sale been on the entire bira, he would have made it clearly that I'm selling you the entire bira. And since he only told him that I'm selling you a bias in a bira, so even though he wrote the dimension of the bira, nevertheless we assume that he's only selling a room in the bira, not the bira. He's selling a field in a large bika, which a large bika is a place where there is a lot of fields. In the star they wrote the gvulis, the mitzarim of the bika. So mitzarim he told him the size of the bika, but on the other he told him he's selling him a sada in that bika. He's not selling him the entire bika. Now, I'm selling you fields in this bika, and obviously those fields, as you can see that there's one field, another field, and there's boundaries which show how many fields there are, and he's telling you, I'm selling you fields in this bika, is miyot sadishtayim. So the minimum is shtayim. So since he wrote fields, and miyot sadishtayim, so he gets 2 fields. Amalei kol sadis, I'm telling you all my fields, is afilu shalish v'arba. He's selling him even 3 or 4 fields. In other words, it's not minimum. Sadis would be only the minimum, but since he said kol sadis, so it includes all his fields. Now, however, chutz bigaris upardesim, it doesn't include a garden. A garden is a place where you plant vegetables, or pardesim, or an orchard where you plant fruit. Now, Omer le nechosim, he told him not only I'm selling you my fields, but I'm selling you all my nechosim. Is then afilu ganis upardesim. That includes also his gardens where he plants vegetables, upardesim, his orchards where he plants fruit. However, chutz mibatim v'avodim, but it doesn't include his houses. We don't assume that in that sale, when he says nechosay neklim lecha, it doesn't mean he's selling him his houses. It means he's selling him his fields and his gardens and his orchards. But it doesn't include not his houses and not his avodim. Now, v'mamar lekol nechosay, if he said, I'm selling you all my nechosim, so then we could understand afilu avodim ubatim. V'chol hametaltum ha'yuduim le. It includes everything that we know belongs to him. Afilu tefillin shemereshay b'klal hamecha. When a person says kol nechosay mechurim lecha, so it means that basically he's selling him all his possessions, all his fields, all his houses, all his movable objects, all his possessions. Ad kedei kach that even tefillin shemereshay. Halacha yutas. So ema lechaverei bayis mibotai or v'sher v'shvare ani meichelcha. He makes a sale with him, and the deal was, I'm selling you one of my houses. Again, we don't know, this is all part of this din, that he was non-specific, but we know what he's talking about. He's talking about houses. He was not specific. Which house? Bayis mi batai. Or I'm selling you an ox of my oxen. Sher mishvarai. He made a maisa chlipin, maisa kinyan. Ani meichelecha. So the din is, noisen le'hakotn shabam. So he has to give him the smallest. In other words, we're not really sure which one he sold. So the rule is, you can't tiny, you get the bigger one, but on the other hand, so you have to give him one, because one for sure you sold. Now, meis echad min hashvarim, if one of the shvarim died, eshenafel echad min abatim, or one of the houses caved in, is mari lizeshe mesi shenafel, so the seller could go ahead and show the buyer, the one that fell, or the one that died. Sheyad balashtar ala tachtena, he says, yeah, you bought a house, and I definitely have to give you one of my houses, the smallest of my houses, or I have to give you one of my shvarim, the smallest of my shvarim. But lepel, one of my houses fell in, and one of my shvarim died. So I'm saying that was the one that was yours. That's the one I'm giving you. That's the one that was yours. And you can't prove differently because lepel, it wasn't clear. So the din is and therefore he could say that this is the one that was yours. I'm selling you the soda which is called the Mechirah. And there were two fields that had this name. Which is the same thing like we learned before. Just like if he said, Sodai misodai animechelecha, so he gives him the smallest or the least valuable, or bias mibatai. So over here also, he told him, Soda the Mechirah animechelecha. So if he has two fields which are both called Soda the Mechirah, he can give the one that's lesser value. Halacha chafalef. I'm selling you a field which is called Stay Reuven. But Lekech is coming and wants to use the field which he knew to be called Stay Reuven. No, this is not really the field that ever belonged to Reuven. This field is called Soda de Reuven. And really this field was never Reuven's. This other field is the field that was Reuven's. And I bought this field from Reuven. And this is the field that I really sold to you. So there was a certain field which was known to be called Soda de Reuven. He's claiming that that's not really the field that ever belonged to Reuven. There was another field that I bought from Reuven. And when I sold you Soda de Reuven, I meant that other field. So the din is Alameche Lohavirai. So now since the pashtus is that this is the Soda de Reuven, this is how everyone knows it, and he's being mechadish something which is not like the pashtus. So the Mechirah has to bring a raya, be'im lehevi, and if he doesn't bring a raya to what he said, is zocha likech bazu shekol le'erim kol Reuven. So then he is zeicher in this field which everyone calls Reuven. V'chein kol kiyetz bazeh halech achar Hashem shu pashut b'fi akel. So if there's a pashut way of understanding the way things are, and even though he's the muhzik, but he's standing against the pashtus advarim, we don't accept what he's saying because we assume that the pashtus advarim is the way it is, and that's how the kinyan was. So the Lekech bought a field which was called Soda de Reuven. The pashtus advarim that this was the field he bought. He's standing that it's not the field that he bought. So even though he's the muhzik, but lepel, since the pashtus is not like that, so the Lekech is called the muhzik, and if he wants to be moitzi from the Lekech, and he wants to say no, that it's not like the pashtus, so he has to bring the raya. Halacha chav beis. Eimol lechaveri chatzi soda ani mechelecha. I'm going to sell you a half of my field. I have a field, a specific field, and I'm going to sell you half of this field. I'm selling you half of this field. Because there was a sale in it, but the sale again wasn't specific which part. He said chatzi soda ani mechelecha. Ishamin kam shava kol hasoda. You assess the value of the field, and then the seller gives the buyer the lesser, knows the part of it that's not such a good part of the field. So in other words, you have a field that's, let's say, worth $1,000, and lepel, it's not really all the field the same. Some of it is better quality, some of it less quality. So he has to give him $500 of the quality of worth of this field, but he could give it to him of the lesser value, of the lesser quality. He said, I'm going to sell you half of the field that's on the south. So the din is shaman to make kula. When you say half of the field, doesn't mean half of the field as far as the size of the field. When he says half of the field, we assume that it means half of the value of the field. So again, shaman to make kula. So in other words, even though he said half of the field, half of the field could be translated as being half of the size of the field. So the chiddush is no, we don't assume it means the size of the field, it means the value of the field. Shaman de Mekula, we assess how much the value of this field is. And he gives him on the darim side, he gives him half of the value of the field. So the lekech accepts upon himself, Lasis bechelkim became a geder, to make a geder in between the two fields. In other words, till now is one field belonging to one person. He's selling half of the field to one person. So now the buyer of the field, he has the obligation to make the geder in between the two fields. And also, me'acheri ha'geder, samach l'geder, behind the Geder, in other words, right next to the Geder, close to the Geder, he has to make a charitz cotton, which is a small trench, which should be rochav shleisha tvachim, which should be 3 tvachim wide, and v'chutzolei, and outside of that trench, which is 3 tvachim wide, he makes another charitz echad gadol. He makes another charitz, another trench, which is rochav shisha tvachim, which is 6 tvachim wide. This is all in his field, next to the Geder. B'nei shnei hacharitzim should be rochav tefach. So basically, you're taking up 10 tvachim over here. You have a charitz, which is 3 tvachim, which is not far from the Geder, and then you have another tefach in between before the next charitz, which is 6 tvachim wide. And the purpose of these charitzim is kol zeh kedei tikpetz hanam yabo kiyetzeba. The marten, which could ruin the fields, shouldn't be able to dance, should jump from one field to the other field. So therefore, you have this ditch and this trench, so which prevents this namya from being able to go over from one sada to another sada. But I'll call upon him. So the deal is that the kudas advarim is that you divide the field not according to its size but according to its value. And then we're learning another din that the buyer has to, the one that has to build the gather, and he's the one that has to make these trenches in order to make sure that from this new field shouldn't come a hezek to the old field, to the old heifer field. Halacha chav gimel. Hoy solei chatzi soda. A person owned a heifer field. Va'amal lechaveri chetzi sheyesh li besoda. The half that I have in this field, macharti lecha. So in other words, he owns a half of this field, and he's saying the half of the field that I own in this field, I'm selling to you. Is kana chetzi kula. So the other person bought the entire field that he has. In other words, he owns a half of the field, and that's what he sold. However, amal lechatzi asoda sheyesh li. If he says half of the field that I have, he didn't say the half of field that I have. Because if he says the half of field that he have, basically all he has is a half of field. So if he says the half of field that I have, basically he's giving him over everything that he has. But if he says chatzi asoda sheyeshli, half of the field that I have that I'm giving over to you, so then likana el reviyah, then he only gets a quarter of the field because he owns a half a field and he's giving him half of what he has. Omar le meitzah soda shemimena nechlekes shemimena nefsekes shemimena nechtzes. He told him the boundary of his field, of the field that he has, and from there he says, I want to give you a part, or I want to divide to you a part. And there's a lashon which means I'm giving you a part of my field. I have a field, and I'm giving you a part of my field. Now the question is, what did he mean when he said a part? Did he mean to give him half of the field? Or did he mean to give him a part of that field, which would be called a field? Now the minimum size of a field is a field of Tisha Kab. That's considered a field. Anything less than Tisha Kab is not called a field. So as I say, if he clearly touched up all the mitzarim of the field, he said the 4 sides of the field. So when he's saying, I'm giving you a part of that field, basically, why did he say all the boundaries of the field? Because he's giving him half of the field. He's telling him the size of the field, and from menu nechlekes, of that's being divided, being nechtzes, being divided in half. Masha'inkin, if he only told him one of the boundaries, so basically he's saying, I have a field. This is one of my boundaries, and from that field, I'm going to give you a part. So I'm not even telling you the size of the entire field. I'm just telling you where the field is, and I'm telling you you're getting a part. So the part that you get is only a part, which is called a minimal field, which is the size of Tisha Kab. That's what he's saying. Amar le meitzer soda shemimena nechlekes shemimena nefsekes shemimena nechtzes. He told them the boundary of the field is amar le ve'elu mitzorah. He told them these are the boundaries, and he told them all 4 boundaries. So then why did he tell them all four boundaries? Because he wants to give them half. So then it's kana chetzi. So Taki gets half of the field. However, v'imlei matzah mitzorah, he didn't tell them all the boundaries of the field. Is lekana ela beis Tisha Kab. Then he's only came in 9 kabim because we assumed that he was only interested in telling him the field that he's giving him a chelik from, but what kind of chelik is he giving him? A chelik which is the minimal chelik to be called a field.